We are about to dive in. Hey, everybody, Ronald Thompson here. And this is the first episode of this podcast on this Cultivators page. This has been a long time coming. Um, this has been a thought process for several years now. And over the last several weeks, I've actually had my mic, I've had my camera, I've had this set up, and I have not known what to release. But today's topic, I believe, is going to be right on time for a few people, whoever would stumble across this. And actually, the topic came from a conversation I had today, just moments, hours ago, with a gentleman who approached me while I was doing some canvassing. But ultimately, that's around forgiveness. And I've recently had to deal with this personally on a personal level. And so coming across his brother today and kind of hearing where he was and the position he was in, talking through some of the things that he had not addressed. And I believe that's the issues of our heart. And there's a scripture that I mentioned to this gentleman today as I was talking to him, and we'll kind of dive into the conversation a little bit. We'll even dive into a little bit of personal. But the scripture that comes to mind is guard your heart at all cost, because from it flows the issues of life. And so when we harbor unforgiveness and we hold on to it in our hearts, it then starts to create some issues in other areas. When I was talking to this gentleman and I kind of asked him, hey, what's going on with you? Because he approached me as I was kind of going from one business to the next to just make some stops. This gentleman said, and he had come to a bad place in his life. And he was talking about how, one thing led to another and he's going to get better, but, it's going to take some time. And as I told him, I was like, yeah, things come get better with time with a plan, not just kind of wishing and hoping that they get better. And when I said that, he's like, yeah, no, I got a plan. And so then I kind of talked through, well, how'd you get here? What were you doing before? What happened? Kind of come down to, my family. I'm not with them anymore. I'm not with my wife. I'm not with my kids. I'm out here just hurting, struggling. And so then I asked him, I said, well, how's your heart? And he looked at me and said, it's not good. It's not good. And I told him, I said, well, I can imagine that that's true because you are where you are. Now, take that in consideration. Take whatever issues that you are having right now in your own personal life, whether it's, we can talk about finances in a sense because ultimately finances have a lot to do with your heart. I don't think people realize that. Your finances have a lot to do with your heart in a sense of who you believe you are, what you believe you're capable of, and what you're allowing yourself to settle for. That's a whole nother topic. We won't get into heavy to that. But I think about that in your relationships. Think about your heart and how you view the world. Think about your heart and how you view your marriage. Think about your heart and how you view maybe, some of the things that you are battling with on a day-to-day basis. Now, using this man as an example, this conversation I had with this man today, the issues that seemed to be apparent were things that he had talked about were actually issues of his heart with himself. I was married. I was in my kid's life. I was working. And so then when he mentioned that his heart wasn't good, I immediately knew that no one's been loving on him and pouring into him in quite some time. And this man confessed that. This man admitted that. And I think that's really where a lot of our issues come from is that within our hearts, we've had so many negative things happen to us that we then decide that we're going to harbor these negative feelings, these negative emotions, these traumatic experiences, and we don't talk about them, we don't deal with them, or even we will bypass them and say, I'm going to leave that there, but I'm going to keep pushing. Ultimately, not ever dealing with that issue, which has planted and festered and shaped ultimately the reality that we live in. And it shaped our perspective of life, our perspective of relationships. And so now diving into this on a personal note, right? I believe in being vulnerable. And so I'm happy to do that because I've learned from my vulnerability. I've actually learned from being transparent in my reading of the word, but also just being transparent with myself and being honest with myself. I recently found myself in a situation where I had to forgive someone very close to me. And in forgiving them, I actually wrote a letter. And I will kind of give you the heading of this letter because I believe this might free somebody else in their life. This is a letter to someone very dear to me, very close, and I woke up from a dream in which I had a conflict with this person. I actually had a strong person wrestling me with me in a dream, and then another strong person wrestling with me, and then I had someone mention this person who I'm having a conflict with, and I started going off. I started going down the list. How can you expect me to have a relationship with them after they've done X, Y, Z, one, the third, the fifth, and hyphen that divided by, multiplied by, add this and subtract that, and like I'm going down the list that we often build up in our minds, but ultimately is rooted in our hearts. And when I went to go and I immediately woke up that morning and I was like, I gotta fix this. This is the issue of my heart. I can feel it. I'm dreaming about it. um how do I go about this? And so I went to open my Bible and I'm like, all right, Lord, what am I going to read? And I stumbled across Second Corinthians chapter 3. I literally stumbled into this. And so I actually put this scripture in my letter to this person because I needed them to understand how God was going to be moving in our relationship moving forward. So I gave them the scripture of Second Corinthians chapter 3, and if I won't go into it, but really in an NIV version, it's called "Forgiveness for the Offender." Right? How powerful is that? That God will lead me directly to a scripture, and starting in verse 5 and ending in with verse 11. Um, the thing that I want to kind of touch on is verses 7. I encourage you to read the whole chapter, but starting in verse 7 of chapter 3, Second Corinthians says, "Now instead you ought to forgive and comfort him, so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, to reaffirm your love for him. Another reason I wrote you was to see if you would stand the test and be obedient in everything. Anyone you forgive, I also forgive. And what I have forgiven, if there was anything to forgive, I have forgiven in the sight of Christ for your sake, in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes." So I knew that in forgiving was going to be not just important for my sanity, but it was going to be important for the other person. And ultimately, it was going to be important for the fact that this was going to be a test. This was going to be those things that the enemy, if I didn't give it to God quick enough, fast enough, was going to start to become something of an issue for me. Not just now, but down the line. And ultimately, it might be an issue for my kids growing up as well. It might be an issue that I might have to deal with at another time and place. So ultimately, what I found myself is going down to write the offenses that had taken place, right? Because ultimately it was going to be sorrow. Ultimately, I wouldn't be able to be around that person no more. Ultimately, I wasn't going to be at peace within myself because of the distance between that person, not knowing that there was an offense that had taken place that I hadn't even expressed in detail yet. So I started this. So after I put the scripture in, and I hope this helps somebody. I wrote this, the type of this letter, and it says, "Above is the verse that weighs heavy on me today. I had a dream that led me to the above scripture, in which I then knew there was an issue in my heart I needed to resolve." I believe a lot of times that when we have unforgiveness in our hearts, we think it has a lot to do with the other person. We think it's what they did, how they wronged us, how we're justified for feeling the way we feel and thinking the way we think. But ultimately, as much as you might believe that and you want to hold on to that, let me know how that works out for you. Because if I'm losing sleep over it, if I'm the one that at peace about it, ultimately it's not them, it's me who's doing something to myself that I need to have resolve for. And so that can be having anger, that can be having a lack of peace, a lack of rest, even, right? That's different from sleep, but having rest. These are things that you have to resolve yourself. No one can come in and do it for you, to be honest with you. And if you are, and I want to speak to this is a main podcast, by the way. And so if you are a man and you are leaving your home, you need to get rid of everything that is an offense to you immediately, as fast as you can, because little by little, that offense is going to change your heart, right? Remember, guard your heart at all costs. From it flows the issues of life. And if you don't take care of those offenses, that those are going to bleed into other areas of your life. So if you're married, it's going to bleed into your marriage. If you have kids, it's going to bleed into your kids later for a relationship with them. If you're a business person, you're at work, it's going to flow into work. It's why people come into work all the time gossiping about what happened and all the issues and all those things. Like, if you're going to be a healthy, positive, influential individual in every space that you occupy, right, in your sphere of influence, you need to make sure that the issues of your heart are taken care of. That's just a free tidbit for you. Now, I then followed up with that sentence of, let me go back. I had a dream that led me to the above scripture, in which I then knew there was an issue in my heart that I needed to resolve. So then I followed up with, today, I forgive you of these past events, and I have labeled what I am forgiving you for so that the offenses may be known. That is crucial. When we forgive people, we have to realize what it is. We have to, one, let them know what we are forgiving them for. And whether or not they respond or not, you have to be clear on what it is that you're forgiving them for. Because what I had found in writing this letter is that there were some things that I wanted to list it as offenses, but were really pride issues that I had not dealt with. I'm going to say that again. In writing the offenses of the other person, going down the list, I found that there were things I wanted to list as offenses, but were really just my pride being hurt. And that they had actually nothing to contribute to that feeling other than myself and my ego. And so these are the things that we have to be able to spend time in, to uncover, to unwrap, to then allow the healing process to come in. As I started writing this list of forgiving things, I then had the ability to healthily articulate that after I've written down all the things that I'm forgiving this person for, which ultimately starts off with a very childhood traumatic experience of dealing with this person. The first thing that I forgave them for, the first thing that came to mind, the first thing that I really pressed into was a pain that was brought up because of recent events that ultimately stem from a past event. And so that was the first thing. And so that's how this was what I mean by you have to forgive people, because I never forgave them for that moment. But I never also felt like I was loving them or experiencing our relationship through that past hurt as well. Does that make sense? So then after I finished my list of forgiving of what I forgive them for, my offenses, I said with that, I am still very hurt by these recent events. I find it best that we do not connect for a while until there's time to heal. Because just because you forgive them doesn't mean that you have healed from the things that you're forgiving them from. I believe that's the first steps to the process, is the forgiveness part of the releasing it from your own hearts, from your own pain, from your own suffering. You still might play this scenario over and over in your head. You still might go through what happened, how it happened, trying to figure out what you could have done right, what they could have done better, what you wish you would have said, what you wish you didn't said. You can still play through all those things, and you most likely will. But the thing that matters most is that you're forgiving of the offense. Now you have to heal, which means that trust has to be reestablished. A lot of times, a response will still most likely will be needed. An apology, hopefully. And sometimes like that apology can actually heal or fix a lot of things a lot quicker. Someone just says I'm sorry, but sometimes you don't get it. But yet you still have to go through the healing process even if you don't get it. And so I believe that with all these issues of the heart, right? This unforgiveness that we're harboring, this type of, because sometimes you can have a conversation with someone, you can get that clarity. But for those people, especially us men who maybe don't have that safe space to have those conversations, right? Because people then want to start trying to defend themselves because they feel like they're being attacked for us exposing to them how they've offended us or how they've hurt us. We still do have to be able to get that off our chest and do it in a way that's articulated and used with words and not with actions, not with wrath, not with belittling them, but truly being off the essence of how it is that I feel. And we have to be able to articulate that into words and not, you did this. No, I feel this. You hurt me this way. You caused me to feel insecure or broken or less than or blah, blah, blah because of you acting or behaving or responding in a way that offended me. Right? And you can apologize for what you did wrong, of course. I highly suggest you do that. But sometimes just first start off with the offenses so the forgiveness part can take place. And then with that, as I talk to now, going back to kind of the point of today's topic, this man, this man who has veered off of life, this man who maybe doesn't have that safe space, this man who has not, most likely, right? Let's be honest. If you're listening to this and you've never had that kind of moment, you're probably thinking like, man, does it really work? I'm here to tell you it does. I've written a couple letters like this in my lifetime, and every time I felt like it was a new beginning, a new chapter of my life that I can start moving forward because of it. I will tell you that this man's issues of his heart, that he needed to forgive some people. And I think one of the biggest things that as men we need to work on is forgiving ourselves as well. We have to be able to forgive ourselves from the things that have happened to us or that have gone wrong with our lives that we were not expecting or we did not want to happen. As men, we have a lot of burden on us: burden to provide, a burden to lead, a burden to protect, a burden to stay strong, a burden to X, Y, and Z, the fifth, right? All these different things, and yet sometimes we don't give ourselves the grace or the mercy to say, "Hey, look at you failed, bro. You failed, and it's okay. I forgive you for being afraid. I forgive you for being insecure. I forgive you for feeling weak and not talking to anyone about it instead of asking for help. I forgive you for not, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what your story is personally, but I've had to forgive myself of a few things. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a businessman, and I have personally failed financially before where like it just didn't work out. But guess what? If I didn't forgive myself, I would have quit and never got back on that horse to say, I can do this. And ultimately, that is for forgiveness that is most crucial. You forgiving yourself. And in this case, with the conflict I'm having with this other person, being able to forgive them allows me the freedom to go live life and be filled with joy and peace and love and grace and mercy still. Not just for that person, even, but for the other people around me, and even for myself, for my wife, for my kids. Because if I can forgive someone who's wronged me and has, in my own mind, offended me, and not let it be turned to hate or malice or envy or strife or conflict, and instead I can fill it with love and peace and joy, how much more better am I going out into the marketplace and being a person who can say, hey, it's all right, right? How much more of a better person can I be to come on here and release this type of video to someone who's maybe struggling with this concept or struggling with a relationship in their life to say, hey, look at that moment doesn't define you. For you forgiving them doesn't make you weak. Um, oh, cut up. That moment doesn't make you anything less other than you healing yourself, or I wouldn't even say healing yourself. Let me wind that back. You're actually giving it to Jesus and allowing Him to heal you. Let me repeat that. There is no such thing as healing yourself. You need to let someone else take care of you. You don't get sick and go to the doctor and say, doctor, I could prescribe this for myself. You don't go to the dentist and have a root canal and say, doctor, dentist, I got this. Even if you are a dentist, you're going to have somebody else help you with that. And in the same way as men, as you carry the burdens of your wives and your kids and the workplace and the world and the weight and all these things, you have to have a place to release it. And I'm gonna tell you, if you don't know where it's at, you can give it to Jesus. You know, when I asked this man about faith, he did tell me something that I won't kind of get into because we're not here to dissect different people's beliefs and stuff like that. But he told me kind of, what he believed in, and I said, ultimately, I said, is that what your grandma used to pray for? He said, no, my grandma used to pray to Jesus. I said, there's a reason why I believe you're still here today because your grandma was praying for you back when you were a child, and she was praying to Jesus. And so, brother, I just encourage you to give it to Jesus. That's what I do. That's how I'm able to stand here. I've I've had my fair share of knocking downs and beats and stepped on and spit upon. Like I've had my own share as well. I've tried the world. I've tried the money, the cars, the clothes, the muscles, the lifestyle, the fast life, the partying in life. I've tried it, but ultimately the best thing that I found was life with Jesus, submitted, committed, and dedicated to it. And so I encourage you out there, if you get to a chance to watch this video, that you can give it to Jesus, that unforgiveness, that hate in your heart, but address it. deal with it. Do it in a productive and healthy manner, and watch God work for you moving forward. God bless you. Peace.